Welcome back to Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, the best damn podcast for the best damn football team. I am your host, the Football Grump. With me, as always, is Mike, the Cranky Fan, and my computer's not working, so we're doing this really shoddy, last second, different, totally weird. Sorry. How's it going?
I'll get my two cans, my tomato soup cans. We can do it that way if you want, like the old days.
With the string, yeah.
Doing good, Grump. Just got back from vacation. Was out in Montana. Had a fun little Super Bowl party. A lot of fun.
In Montana? I thought you were in Colorado. I was wrong.
I was in Bozeman, Montana. Shout out to my buddy Dave and his place. But before we do, I have a very important announcement for you, Grump. I have to read a statement from the cranky wife.
Okay.
I am disappointed. We will move on. That's her assessment of the Super Bowl on Sunday. So I want to get that out there because I know a couple of people have asked me, what her thoughts were. If she jumped off a building or not. She's still alive and with us. But she kind of knew that was going to happen. That was her, that was the text I got immediately after the game. I knew this was going to happen. So I'm sure we'll talk. Let's talk about the game because it was definitely interesting.
That was a very Bill Belichick press conference right there. That was short and to the point.
She's on to 2024.
Yeah. And he's not, I guess.
We live in a world where Robert Saleh is still a head coach and Bill Belichick and Vrabel and who else? A lot of big name guys are not coaching right now.
Saban?
I think he's done. He's going to go to ESPN. But there's a lot of choice candidates that are out there, and there's some scrubs that are still employed.
And we're going to get to the Giants coaching updates now at the end of this one, but in this episode. But first, we'll talk about the Super Bowl before we get into like heady football stuff. Just in general, the Super Bowl was boring, right?
The first half was boring. I think that turned into. I mean, all you want really, if you're a non-objective fan and you are, just watching a game, you just want to have it entertaining and close and, big plays at the end. And we had none of that in the first half. We had close because nothing happened. The biggest thing about that was I won my 0-0 box at the end of the first quarter and almost hit it again at halftime. So that made it exciting. But the first half was pretty boring. And
I'm going to challenge that the second half was any more exciting. You didn't really get that many big plays. And the overtime most important plays were like Patrick Mahomes running and no one even near him. Those were your big plays in overtime that moved the chains.
Yeah, but there's something for drama and there's something for,
Yeah, but here's the thing. You and I both knew it was over long before we got to there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how much drama was there really? Because I'm telling you, like, some people think that this was really exciting, and I disagree because I never even got off the couch. I was watching it like, oh, I see what's happening here. Wow. Okay. And it was right from the beginning, right? I mean, let's go down the list. Opening drive, everything looks great, and then he fumbles.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Who had McCaffrey fumbling on their bingo card? And that's the beauty of this. You don't know.
Then they go on defense and they beat the shit out of him, and you're like, oh, okay, they still got this. And then you go for the next drive and it ends in a field goal. Or I don't even know if did they even kick the field goal in the next drive?
They got the field goal in the second drive, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. So they marched down the field and then it ended in a field goal. And the cracks were just starting to show. And then, the defense, again, still whooping ass out there. And then all of a sudden, Dre Greenlaw goes down for like no reason. And,
that was the game.
Back and you're like, okay, so now the defense is no longer kicking ass and they didn't capitalize on all the opportunities they had at the beginning. I get how this is going to go. And you and I were texting, I think, right after halftime, the beginning of the third quarter. Mm-hmm. And it was only because I figured you were doing stuff and whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think there was that much drama. I think the end was really predictable.
I mean, we could have predicted the ending two things can happen at once. Like we predicted what was going to happen, but it was still exciting how he got there.
Yeah, but I mean, when you look back at like, okay, Giants 2011 Super Bowl, dramatic ending comes with a big, huge throw and catch. what am I missing? What am I forgetting? That was at the end of the game, because there was one bomb to somebody that actually I think ended in a field goal for the Chiefs.
I don't know. I mean, it wasn't big play worthy exciting. It wasn't bombs away. It wasn't, oh my God, I had to hold on to my seat. It's just so exciting. It's just, again, we've been watching football all our lives. And, when you get to big games and big plays and big moments, it's just exciting. You don't remember, there was a long stretch of Super Bowls in the 80s and 90s where every game sucked. I mean, the Cowboys were so good and San Francisco was so good, and they kill these AFC teams. So, and you have all these different subplots that are happening, is now Patrick Mahomes in the Brady stratosphere? Is Brock Purdy for real or not? And all these things are kind of happening right now. And I was glued to my seat, fourth quarter on.
I don't know, man.
As much as I can be when it's not my team. I mean, really.
See, that's where I disagree. Well, I mean, disagree is subjective, right? Like it's. I'm happy for you that it happened that way. I'm disappointed that it was boring for me, because let's face it, I think we both agree that the halftime show was boring as shit, and the commercials this year and the past decade have been boring as shit. So the whole thing has been just a boring experience.
I'm gonna have a boomer moment here and talk about halftime for 1 second, where I think they need to completely revamp what they do for halftime. The fact that you have 12 minutes and you are trying to jam 4,000 things happening.
They have more than 12 minutes. They increase halftime for the Super Bowl.
No. The actual.
Oh, the show itself is 12 minutes.
The show itself, the 12 minutes of that show is on, and you have, you're trying to do 7 songs and 4 costume changes and 7 guest stars and all this. And I don't think it's entertaining. I just think and it's just tired. I don't know what the solution is for halftime. I don't really. First of all, I'm not one who sits around and cares and really worries about it, but it just seems like we need to do something different because, again, boomer moment, I know I saw a lot of tweets going around like, well, Usher, now I feel like I'm back in 2003, but it's like, well, that's not me. That's not I'm already past college by then. I don't really care. I know a couple of songs from him, but, I don't know what the solution is for halftime, but something has to change for it. And believe me, if you're at the stadium, the halftime show is 10 times worse. Most likely you don't have the same visuals you do on TV, and the sound is 50 times worse.
That I've heard before. Yeah, I don't disagree at all. My bigger thing was, and this sounds like a nostalgia moment, but correct me if I'm wrong. My upbringing, Super Bowl halftimes were like, they weren't concerts. They were like the biggest thing that you could do as as an artist, but it was also like the world's biggest stage, or America's biggest stage, at least for one night. Like there are more people watching this than anything else. And the sets were always like larger than life, gigantic things. And like, I think it's kind of been on a steady decline for the last couple of years. Again, I don't actually care about this shit, but it's relevant to what I'm saying.
I think you're absolutely right, because.
But this one was literally just a concert. There was nothing that happened in this that wouldn't have been a normal Usher concert, other than the extremely condensed set list and like all the other people there.
Well, I think it's kind of like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is now. Like when they first started the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, who gets nominated? The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Elvis. Like your A-list of A-list people. And now it's kind of like, Heart is getting in. And I think it's the same thing that's happening with Super Bowl shows. The first shows were Michael Jackson, about as big as you can get. Madonna, Rolling Stones, Prince, Springsteen. These are, massive. And then even the, the hip hop one with Dre and all those guys. These massive, massive stars where everybody knows all. But now we've kind of gone through them all already. And the live music is not what it was. Rock and roll is not as big as it used to be. And all those stars and acts are old. There is nothing. I mean, other than right now, like Foo Fighters, Green Day, I mean, who's really left? It's like
Has Guns N' Roses ever done it?
They have not done it, and that would be an interesting one.
That might be a pretty good one. And I don't even like Guns N' Roses.
And that might be one of the last of the nostalgia bands that hasn't done it yet. Because again, like, who's really out there from a rock and roll perspective? And they haven't had a rock band since who? Coldplay? No, a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you consider Bruno Mars. I guess just straight up pop.
He's a pop singer. Yeah. Again, and that's just America as a whole. Their music is just segmented now. It's not top 40 music and rock and roll. It's everybody listens to their own music, and there's so many different subgenres and stuff. You're never going to get that. Everybody loves this guy. Everybody knows all the songs. So if you don't have that anymore, what do you do? And I'm not a producer. I'm not a TV executive. I don't know what that answer is, but this is getting boring. And
I got to be honest.
Take a piss.
Yeah. And again, like the halftime show, I understand I'm not the demographic for it, but that's not really the point. The shows are objectively getting worse, is what I'm saying. And I don't have a problem with Usher being the selected artist. I think Usher being selected is a symptom of exactly what you said. The cause being there just aren't big.
I disagree.
Big acts.
I disagree, Grump. I think you are exactly the demographic. 35 to 50. That's what they want.
But they expect me to be like throwing out my wing bones and shit at their halftime show. No.
Yeah, but I mean, the Super Bowl is all about ratings. We had a conversation offline. Would they ever move the Super Bowl to Saturday? And I said no, for two reasons. One, more people watch TV on Sundays than Saturdays. That's a fact. Look at it forever. I mean, this was the highest rated TV show of all time. They just announced more people watch that than any program since the moon landing, which is pretty fascinating. And two, they don't want people leaving the host city on Sunday. They want them to stay another day. So, but TV ratings are about not teenagers and not 20 something. It's about people who have money and people who, our age group.
So here's the thing about that. I don't disagree. I understand that the NFL would never move the game to Saturday. It was a fun conversation that was happening at my job, and you weren't there, which sucks. Because I think you would have been fun for that conversation. But they say straight up that it's the ratings they know are going to go down. But I also think that that's predicated on we expect them to go down, and I have no problem with that. It's probably completely correct. Just for a fun experiment. Well, so the argument that we were having was this is such a huge event that people will do things to watch this game. Like if they're going to do something else, if they're going to go out, I know, hang on, hold all of your criticism. I got a lot to say.
No. I have a solution, but go ahead.
But like more events will happen at bars. Things like that. And this isn't coming from a gripe place of like, I have to work hungover on Monday, because I wasn't hungover and I have no problem working the next day. It's just, I actually think that you get more out of it when it's on a Saturday. And, the opposition was, think about your girlfriend. Is she going to continue to watch the game with you, knowing that she doesn't have to go to bed at night and go to work the next day? Or is she going to go out with her friends on Saturday? So for fun, I asked all the girls in the room, who were all girlfriends, and none of them like football. And all of them said on Saturday, we would go out and do whatever you guys were doing to watch the game, because that's what everyone is doing. Everyone's going to watch the game anyway. Like the NFL doubting its draw is something that's really odd to me. I think they're one of the few things that could move the TV needle from Sunday to Saturday. So that's just my personal opinion. I think also that makes it more of a thing and less of a homogenous thing. To me, the way the NFL has marketed itself throughout my lifetime seems to be on a steady tipping point to, rather than it being the draw for people to come in, was more like, we will change to accept all of you, and in all kinds of ways. And this sounds like a boomer talking, but it's, I still love football, so it's clearly not a massive problem for me. But in all ways, from the rules down to the way it's marketed, like the way that the NFL is trying to get kids involved because they are experiencing a demographic shift is to cartoon it up and throw it on Nickelodeon, rather than throw enormous amounts of money into like youth football, into actually getting kids into football. They're like Snapchatting football instead. You know what I'm saying? It's been like a marked decrease in its own value over time.
Here's my counter to that is that if they were so interested in mass growing the sport and maximizing ratings possible, you would not have the Amazon game on Thursday. You would not have the Peacock playoff game, because you are decreasing the amount of people who can possibly watch it. The NFL cares about one thing and one thing only: maximizing their TV contracts, period.
I think it's more like short-term money, but yeah, go ahead.
Yes, they're at the risk of people not be able to watch a game because they have Peacock, at the risk of players who have to play on Thursday nights, at the risk of players who have to go to England, at the risk of players, just not being prepared, for games because the way the schedule is set up. So I see your point about that. And the other thing is the NFL, we talk about this offline too, is the NFL doesn't care about the bar. They don't care that, if more people hang out on a Saturday night after the game. That's not their concern. They know they're not getting anything from that. There's nothing for them. They're worried about them. They're worried about their business partners. They're worried about their sponsors. So, I mean, the solution to this is really simple. We push this out now to almost mid-February when this season. Next week is a holiday. It's President's Day. A lot of people are off on Monday. Move the season out another week and have the Super Bowl on Sunday with a lot of people being off on Monday. I mean, you had an extra bye week during the season. I mean, I might add for a better product during the season anyway, of having guys having more rest. That would solve the question about, well, I got to get ready for work on Monday or something, because I know some people have to work and that's too bad, but a lot of people are off on that, and that seems like a pretty good compromise. And to see also how well that would do.
I think that's a brilliant compromise. I've heard it brought up before. You know that the NFL will not accept another bye week as the solution. It'll be another week of football.
But
it'll be another playoff round is really what it'll be. They'll find a way to make it another playoff game.
Or they add a second bye week and you just have more teams. You're rotating more teams. You're playing a 17-game schedule over 19 weeks as opposed to, and teams rotate those games in. So they'll have 19 weeks of season. And that's more inventory for the league too.
So the thing is, I don't disagree with any of that. I know what you're saying is correct, and but all of it's for when you have continual short-term gain in the form of money at the expense of your product consumability, you have what I consider to be fake value. So like, yeah, it's really cool that they have these big TV contracts, but like that money all gets spread around to things that really don't matter. Like a $50 million contract to Tom Brady to call the game. And I know that's not directly from the NFL, but it spills out of the NFL. It's all part of this, like this big money machine. It's all just big money, and nothing with the product has gotten better, I would say. I don't really think that broadcasts have gotten better. I don't think the product that I think I can make an excellent argument has gotten worse over the course of my lifetime.
I completely agree 100%. And if it was the one thing that has saved football, saved like the trajectory of revenue, of quite frankly fan interest too, because you remember 5, 6 years ago with after Colin Kaepernick and all the protests that everybody had, his protest and the protest to his protest, and that was right around the time the CTE things were coming out, that the NFL was in the lowest popularity that it had been in years and years. They are goddamn lucky, and they should pray every night that gambling became legal, because gambling has given it the boost that it needs. It's given more popularity, more people are watching it, and it's directly attributable to when gambling started. So
don't think that is a coincidence. Like,
no.
The NFL lobby, is as strong as you might think a company like this. And that's what I'm saying. Like, they have all of this power, and they could make football better by investing in the sport itself. But instead, to get girls involved, they're all about giving out merchandising deals to Kyle Juszczyk's wife and Taylor Swift. That's how they're going to get women to watch now. They're going to just ride that bullshit. And then, for kids, we'll slap some bullshit on Nickelodeon, pay them money to put our thing on there, or some bullshit like that.
It's easier and less legal issues by telling a kid, go, hey, watch Nickelodeon and watch Slime, as opposed to sponsoring a league with 9-year-olds where a kid might get a concussion.
I guess so, but there's other things you could do, like investing money into youth football coaches and how to play the game more safely, and making sure that you only have certified coaches coaching your kids and things like that. That might sound like a money-making scheme, but actually, if you have to fund the facility and the teaching and all that shit, it kind of might break even at best. But at the end of the day, you raise better football players over time, and you grow genuine interest in your product.
This is the problem you have when you have a monopoly in something with, inelastic demand, where people love what your product is and no one else can challenge it. And I know you've done extensive work on Spring League and everything, and
but that's not like a real competition.
But I'm talking about, my point is, that's the closest we've gotten in 50 years since the AFL NFL merged for anything coming close to competing with its dominance and its monopoly on this sport. So when you are a monopoly and you have this, demand, why would you do these things? I mean, just because people are willing to accept a product that isn't as good as it once was because they love the sport, they want to gamble on the sport. And, there's so much more ways to consume the sport. It's no longer just my team is on for 3 hours on Sunday once a week. I mean, you can watch you could spend your entire life on Twitter just looking at highlights and analysis. You can watch, if you're your favorite team, you can listen to 50 podcasts. You can spend your entire week from midnight to midnight watching shows about that sport. There's unlimited ways to do that. So they don't really have the need or the interest, I think, to say, let's elevate this product. It's sad, but it's unfortunately, that's the problem we have.
And ultimately, this conversation was, a little, it all boils back to, that's why I thought this one was boring. I honestly thought this was a predictable outcome. I think that even getting there was kind of boring. Like I was saying, like, there wasn't really, the drama was predictable, and the big plays were like, and Patrick Mahomes not being tackled for some reason, or just like not being covered at all, and just running for like 40 yards and sliding. It was like the least dramatic way to score a touchdown in 30 seconds. Like,
it boils down. This game really boiled down to two things. One, Patrick Mahomes is better than Purdy.
Yep.
And two, with Al Greenlaw, their defense wasn't good enough. That was basically it. And they're two very close teams. They are two, good coaches. I know. What's his name's going to get crucified for blowing leads in Super Bowls, Shanahan. But these are two well-coached teams. They're really good rosters. They're close teams, and they play each other 10 times.
You might get a 5-5 record.
Yeah, and nobody would be like, that's shocking. It's just, the Super Bowl. It was a good way to spend a Sunday. I enjoyed my Sunday very much.
I don't know. I might have been one of the few people to groan when I saw it was going to overtime, but I don't know. that maybe that's just me. So, since we're talking about, I don't know. Do you want to go over the 4th down decision? Did you care about that?
I want to talk more actually about the going for it. Like, what do you do with the ball in overtime with the new rules? Where,
all right,
let me ask you something.
Okay.
First of all, Grump, did you know the rule changed?
Yes, but I had forgotten until the overtime situation came up. Like, until it was really going to overtime, I had forgotten that the rules changed.
So the rule is now, obviously, even if you score a touchdown on your opening drive, the other team gets a chance. And the other thing that was confusion in the room we were in was, it's not whoever's leading at the end of the first overtime, the game is over. Because here's my thing of that was still Kansas City's first drive. So if they didn't score,
I don't believe it works like. Oh, I see what you're saying. Go ahead.
Right. So like in the NBA, there's overtime. It's a 5-minute overtime, and at the end of the 5 minutes, whoever's leading wins. Now, obviously, because of the way the overtime is in the NFL, it's sort of sudden death after you get past that first field goal and then everything. But because it was still Kansas City's first drive, they weren't battling the clock at the end of the first overtime. They just would have gone to a second overtime,
if they
even though they were losing.
What?
Because it was still their first possession in overtime, and they have an opportunity to match.
So I didn't know that, but I mean, it didn't really matter because they were right there in field goal range to tie it and go to a second overtime anyway.
Right, but they didn't have to. They didn't have to. It would have been second down. That's the thing. It was just a really quirky thing what happened.
See, the overtime rules, I don't want to go down this. The overtime rules are fucked because they screwed up defense. They've taken all the teeth out of defense, and now it makes overtime unfair. So now you have weird overtime rules that I didn't even understand what you were saying for literally 5 minutes, and I'm going to have to edit out of this episode now. Because I was just staring at the camera slack-jawed like an idiot because I didn't understand what you were saying because this is so stupid. I get what you're saying now, and basically what you're saying is like, how dumb is this? It would have been dumb. You're going to start a second overtime with different scores? It's stupid.
You'd be starting a second overtime even though one team was winning at the end of the first overtime.
So to answer your question about the decision to take it or not, I think the decision is negligible, and I think everybody is looking for a mathematical certainty or like any kind of certainty. And I think it comes down to preference. First of all, I think it comes down to preference. And second, I think it comes down to your fucking roster. Okay. Everyone who makes decisions purely on math is stupid because if you're more trusting of, like if Dre Greenlaw are still out there, I think, I don't know, you could do whatever at that point. The defense was not letting them gain a yard when Dre Greenlaw was out there. So, I think that if you wanted to march down the field and put a dagger in them and put up 7 points and be like, yeah, now beat that or whatever. If you just feel more confident with it, you feel more confident with it. I don't think that it makes a huge difference. I don't think that battling a clock or having to match what the other team does means much to me psychologically because my objective is to score a touchdown on every single drive that I'm doing.
Yeah, like Vince Lombardi said that every play he designed was to score a touchdown. That was the goal of every single play. And to me, you know how I am, Grump. I say this every time. I want the ball first. I want to score first. I want to put the pressure on them. And also, when you get into overtime related to your roster, defenses are exhausted. Defenses are reacting. And on offense what you want to do, they got to react to it. And,
and quite frankly, San Francisco's defense had just gotten off the field at the end of the fourth quarter.
Exactly. So I wouldn't kill any coach for, kicking off first or taking the ball first. I know me. I always want the ball first. I always want to have a lead as fast as possible. So.
Regarding the 4th and 3 decision or 4th and 4 decision to kick the field goal, I don't think that it's a huge deal. But personally, I'm somebody who would have went for it there. And the reason I say that is because it is the Super Bowl and I'm trying to win. That's really it. I think in the regular season, I'm kicking that field goal 100% of the time, unless it's like a win and in situation. Just anything where it's back against the wall like that, you're that close. 4th down, I'm trusting that if we can't get 4 yards, then at least my defense, somebody's going to step up here. Somebody's going to step up. I'll either win the field position battle with my defense or someone's going to get a first down. At a certain point, you're in the Super Bowl. You have to trust your players to make plays, right? And in 4th and 1 situation for Kansas City, you put the ball in Mahomes' hands. And, you can say whatever you want about, he doesn't really run that much since he got hurt or whatever. You put the ball in Mahomes' hands on 4th and 1. You're not punting it away.
He still scares me more than anybody in the league on 4th and 1 having the ball, even more than Hurts with Philly, that he could do so many different things, and he's so smooth at what he does too.
I also don't think kicking the field goal is crazy. It's just personally, I wouldn't have done it. That's all.
To me, it depends on my personnel again. And when I have Patrick Mahomes, who, has such a versatility of the things he can do. And again, we're in the 4th quarter, same worn out defense I just mentioned about in overtime. Stop me.
Yeah. So I don't know. We shit all over the NFL product for like 15 minutes. You wanted to talk about favorite Super Bowl memories.
Yes, I saw something on Twitter this week that had what was your favorite Super Bowl memory Giant Super Bowl memory of all time? And I think the options were, obviously the helmet catch, the Manningham catch. I forget what the third one was. It was something from one of those two Super Bowls, and then one of the selections was Scott Norwood. And we were talking offline. I said, this is obviously a question that is generation based. And that opened up a little conversation. I wanted to kind of share that, have this conversation on the show and figure out what other people think as well. Again, if you don't know, if you're relatively new to the show, I am, what am I, 15 years older than you, Grump?
Yeah, just about.
Yeah. So I lived through, I started being a Giant fan back when Ray Perkins was the head coach. I was through the beginning of the awful part of Bill Parcells' regime where he almost got fired after the first year. So we won the first Super Bowl when I was in ninth grade. So, I kind of have a different perspective, I think, than a lot of people who listen to this show, follow us on Twitter, and do other shows also. As great as the helmet catch was, as great as the Manningham catch was, I think the Plaxico Bears catch, I think was the third one. That Scott Norwood kick was the greatest moment in my mind in Giant history, and I don't really even think it comes close. That team, people forget, was 11-0 during the regular season and before Phil Simms got hurt. You're playing with Jeff Hostetler, who's a backup in this league, against a really, really, really good Buffalo Bills team. I mean, people now just think of them as a joke. Oh, they lost 4 Super Bowls, ha ha ha. But that team had Hall of Famers all over the place, Hall of Fame coach. And, the situation around that game, which a lot of people forget about, that was a week after Desert Storm started. There was real talk of canceling that game because of security concerns, all these different things. There was only a week between the conference championship game and the Super Bowl. So it was complete chaos leading up to it. So it was a very tense situation. The Whitney Houston singing the national anthem has become iconic and all that. And, you had stars all over the place in that game. It's a game the Giants were significant underdogs in. Significant. I would say bigger underdogs than the Patriot one. And to kind of dominate that game and have it come down to one kick and have him miss it to me, it's still my greatest feeling and moment in Giant history. I mean, I was a freshman in the dorms watching it. It was just, I was really, really, really invested in that season, going to bars every week to watch them down in Gainesville. And, all this, everything else, those were great moments, great single highlights. But for importance, and iconicness, that's the play for me. And again, I'm coming from a boomer perspective more, but that was the biggest. I don't think I can ever be topped.
So I think the question is too difficult for. First of all, there's no argument if you're only going to ask Giants fans. So if you ask among Giants fans, the answer is going to be so personal that there is no wrong answer, right? And nor is. But if you're going to kind of look at the question as objectively as possible, so if you were to ask like non-Giant fans, which this is like a stupid conversation, but like what's the best memory or whatever, I think the Norwood wide right makes a lot of sense, but it's really difficult to separate out the season from the Super Bowl itself and just the setup for it, right? So for me, the answer is difficult because I think objectively the answer is, and I wouldn't say the helmet catch moment, I would say the Burris touchdown, really, personally, but that was, I think objectively was more an expectation that was going to be a game in which people were going to see history and they were going to see an undefeated Super Bowl winner at 19-0. And I mean, people everywhere. I know I have a friend that was going to college in Boston at the time, and like they were like practically ready. They were all set up and ready to go to celebrate this shit. Like it was not supposed to happen. And for much of the game, I wouldn't even say like it was like tense, like it was keeping it close. It was just kind of like waiting for the Patriots to blow it open. It didn't feel like, oh man, they're hanging in there. At least it didn't for me. It just kind of felt like, sooner or later Randy Moss was getting open or something like that. And for the situation to go down the way it did in the closing moments was so goddamn improbable. Everything about the throw and catch. There was a near pick on that drive. I mean, Giants fans know all this shit. So I think objectively, when you look at it, that is just always going to be so hard to top, because if you add in the thing. I know it's Hostetler, but Hostetler was around in the league for a really long time. A backup caliber, obviously, for sure, but had been around. He was a veteran. Eli Manning, huge question marks all over the place about him coming into the game. It's just hard to top that, I think. And I think that 90 is probably the closest that you can get after that. And I wasn't really around for 86. I was born in 87.
I would say I would rank them in my personal 91, 86, 2. The first Patriot one 3, and then the other one a little bit more of a distant 4. But that first one, even though I was only 13, I still had a sense of like history. And I was like, all I remember was like, again, I'd been a Giant fan at that time, 5 years maybe or so. But my thinking was, I will never have to be a Cleveland Brown fan, because that was right around the time when the Browns were blowing AFC Championship games to Denver. It's before they moved, obviously, but like the Ernest Biner fumble and the drive. And I just remember thinking, at least I'm going to see a championship in my lifetime. And, it was a big moment even at that time. And you never forget your first. I mean, quite honestly, too. But that 90 team was more special to me than that 86. And it's that kick, because we were out of gas. And if that game is another 10 seconds, we lose. They would have got another 10, 15 yards on another Thurman Thomas run. Norwood has a 32-yarder. He nails it. History has changed. So it was really just like tick, 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 tick. Just go, clock, clock, clock. Just run out, run out. And I remember just sitting there watching it like literally like this on my, at the party and as soon as it went, you knew right away. And that still brings me chills now, 3 years later.
So what's funny is that while I think 07 is the objective best and 91 is probably the second best, my personal one is the 11 one, which is funny because for me, it was because I was so invested in that season. It was the first time that you and I had gone to literally every home game that year. Mm-hmm. So I was deeply connected with that team. I was intimately familiar with every transaction that went on during it. I remember beforehand, signing free agents, Rocky Bernard and Deion Grant, and being
this is probably the birth of our text chain that became the birth of the genesis of this show.
I got to go to that we hosted a playoff game for that run. So we got to go to that and we just absolutely beat the shit out of the Atlanta Falcons. That was a no contest. That was so much fun. And what's interesting is that the 11 one is special to me because I had seen it all before, to the point where when the situation came up, I was as calm as could be. I knew it was over. I knew we were winning the game. And so I remember texting you specifically and saying, there's nobody else I'd rather have the football right now. I knew it. It was absolutely perfect. Everything that happened that night, I won a Super Bowl pool. So for me personally, the 11 season was great. I remember that Super Bowl. I don't think I'll ever forget any part of that season.
I had the exact opposite feeling of you, because Cranky Wife and I were at the game, and I remember them getting the ball back with not much time left. I remember just turning to him and going like, I can't believe we're going to go through this exact same thing again, which, I'd thrown up at the game 4 years earlier, right before that. And I was like, I can't believe this is going to happen again. And Cranky Wife's like, are you going to throw up on me again? And I was like, there's probably an 87% chance that's going to happen. I mean, to go through something like you couldn't even write that script for the game 4 years earlier. And then here we are. They got the ball. It was a lot less time they had, but it was just like, we're doing this again. And just the relief of like, we did it again. We did it again. It was, believe me, like you said, there are no wrong answers. It's your personal, it's your situation, your memory, your, time and place, and it's all great. But I just can't believe how I'm thinking about this stuff now, and there's literally a smile on my face, thinking like we just finished a horrible season, and we're so far away from that again. But yeah, this
But
is
the thing
fun,
is that
fun times.
we were happy enough to we were lucky enough to get a couple in our lifetime. So I mean, you only get a couple. So you do all
Ask,
these things. You lose 8 years out of 10 to win twice, and you're happy.
hey, how excited we're Lions fans this year,
Yeah.
and they even go to the Super Bowl. So
Um. All right. So Giants hired a couple of coaches. One super duper important one, defensive coordinator Shane Bowen from Tennessee. Um. Immediate thoughts. Anything? Anything you feel?
well, the thing that I went to immediately was, okay, how does that impact our current roster and what we're going to do with free agency and the draft coming up? I mean, is you know, I also am a person that I always believe players play. And, coaching is very important, obviously, but coaching achievements are always kind of like, well, who did they have? So, as you can go back and say, well, the Titans were 10th in the league in average against the rush on third down, but that's great and all. But what is he going to do? Like, what are his philosophies? What does he want to do? How does that jive with what we have now with the current roster? What do we need to do to put in pieces that he needs? Because we're still in this rebuilding. And now, 12 months ago, we didn't think Wink Martindale would be leaving in the way that he did. We thought we were building a roster, and you had mentioned it several times throughout the season of the show that we had drafted specifically for guys that are tailored to his defense. Now, if you make a change, all of a sudden what you built towards, especially specifically for that, has to change a little bit. So my initial questions for you, Grump, are thinking about the current roster, thinking about guys that we have to make decisions on. Um, who are guys you think that will going to benefit from having him as our defensive coordinator, and who are guys that probably should be thinking about calling a realtor because they may be leaving because they may not have a place on this team anymore?
So, you and I think similarly, because that was exactly what I started doing first. Was like, all right, so what's the transition here, personnel wise? And what I found out so I'm not done doing my own personal research, but reached out to a friend of mine who is very, very familiar with the Tennessee Titans, Stoney Keeley. I've talked about him many times on this show. He's the best.
I think we've both been on his show. I think different times.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're right. And so I reached out to him immediately, and basically the main gist of what I got back from him is that all of the things that Wink Martindale liked to do post snap, where he shows you one look and the defense completely changes as soon as the ball is snapped, that's going to stay. The main difference is that Wink Martindale was coming with heat from somewhere on every play. Sometimes it was only four guys. Blitz statistics in the NFL are imperfect. If that fourth guy is like a guy from the secondary, it still counts as a blitz or something like that. It's not quite right. It's a little bit inflated. But the point is that you knew that somewhere there was going to be a guy coming from that may be unorthodox, and you had to make sure that your protection schemes were set up. That is not really going to happen much. Most of the outside linebackers and defensive end the edge rushers here are going to be kind of just pass rushing and doing stunts with the defensive tackles and that sort of thing. However, the fact that there is going to be post-snap coverage changes means that the same kind of thing that happened with Wink Martindale, where you had to have really good communication between all of your DBs, is still going to be there. So guys that were used to a lot of terminology and making sure that you were, properly lined up and disguising what you were doing and rotating into the correct things and knowing what to do with your assignments, that shouldn't change too much. That's going to probably stay the same. It's not going to be quite as much man coverage because there's not going to be as many blitzes, but we're not really looking at just suddenly switching to like a cover 2 zone. So it's just going to be like off coverage and stuff like that. So a lot of it is still going to be like off man coverage. So your Deonte Banks is still going to fit, I think, just as well, maybe even more. Maybe even better, because he will be less prone to needing to be grabby. He can play as off as he's comfortable with his own closing speed. I think that a veteran safety like Xavier McKinney that's good at communicating is a fit, but I think in this particular defense, you want somebody that's a little bit more rangy, somebody that can play a little bit better of the single high than McKinney can. And I think McKinney can. I just think somebody maybe that's a little bit longer, a little bit faster. Like I would say Jason Pinnock as a athlete is more what you're looking for, but as a, not a veteran. So
and McKinney might have, there may be questions about him that are beyond just scheme and stuff that they want back anyway.
Yeah, that may be beyond football. And then the other thing that should translate well is the linebackers should translate precisely the same from what I'm understanding is that you're going to have a guy who's going to be a main disruptor that's trying to shoot gaps, trying to, bring pressure or frustrate, maybe QB spy, drop into coverage, cover your tight ends, and then you're going to have a thumper next to him that's stuffing run gaps. That's what we've already got with Bobby Okereke and Micah McFadden, I think. I think that we're set personnel-wise on what I would consider the biggest investments into the defense the last year, which were Okereke and Deonte Banks, in my opinion. Other than Dexter Lawrence, who you would have paid money to anyway. I think also that you might get more out of Kayvon Thibodeau doing less nonsense where he's kind of controlling gaps and stuff like that and doing more rushing the passer.
Okay.
So I don't know how that makes you feel. For me, I feel a little mixed because it kind of stinks that we're going from I like bringing pressure, but it stinks that we're going down to we're looking at a handful a game.
I think where we are with the rebuild, I'm okay where we are now. Because let's say we had Wink for 4 or 5 years and we had really exactly had players in his system, and then all of a sudden you're really starting a rebuild over. I mean, we have the opportunity now with a free agency and a draft coming up that we can kind of take start fitting immediately without having to really tear down things as it is. So I'm not too overly concerned about roster construction because the more important thing, honestly, for this defense is to increase the overall talent level of it anyway. So we have to improve, in places that had to be done regardless. So now it's just, instead of a guy that might have fit in this thing, we're looking for someone who has maybe a slightly different skill set. So the timing of it is okay for me. And again, we're still building a better roster. And I think that's the key, is getting better players in here.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm most excited about is that most of the key investments are going to be carryovers into exactly what you want in the scheme. So the roster, the personnel itself, I think is going to stay largely the same, which is cool because we invested a lot of money. And it would just be stupid to have traded up in the first round and drafted a guy that you can't. I mean, not that you can't use, but that you can't maximize. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I'm feeling pretty good about Shane Bowen. Like I said, there's some things I want to watch first and see with my own eyes. And I haven't done that yet. But I feel pretty good about that. And, I think that this might shut the door on Xavier McKinney.
I think
you know what I mean? Like, I think if it was slightly ajar, I think it's now closed. Which is interesting because I think that Wink probably didn't like him very much. I don't know.
And if Wink is such a player's coach and Wink didn't like him, that might tell you something too, overall.
Yeah. I do think that the solution is probably going to come via free agency for safety, though, because I do think that the value that's placed on communication and the safety being physically in the center of the defense in the defensive backfield is, I don't know if he's going to get the dot on his helmet is what I'm saying, but regardless, he's going to be communicating left and right side.
Yeah, he may not need the dot, but I mean, bringing in Bobby Okereke as like a veteran presence, I think stabilized a lot of things on that defense. And I think having a guy like him in the back end of the defense, I think would be very, very key. Because again, Deonte Banks is still in his second year. We don't know what that makeup is going to be back there. There's still going to be a lot of young guys back there. So having one that's, a mature, experienced guy, I think will do wonders for them also.
Well, I think the main thing that I'm mostly excited about is that when you look at the defensive personnel or whatever, you have question marks built in already. Forget the wink shit. What's happening with Xavier McKinney? What are we doing with Adoree Jackson? What happens if Deontay Banks goes down? We have like one defensive back right now.
Right.
Those
And,
questions were not added to, I would say. Like there's
and,
not more added to that problem.
and I'm in my calculus for all this, I'm assuming the worst. Like Adoree
Right.
Jackson's gone. Xavier McKinney is gone. I mean,
So
what
am
do you
I.
really have back there? So that's what I'm kind of thinking about this, this hypothesis of bringing in that veteran, you know, safety is the anchor of. He may not be a Pro Bowler, but someone just to kind of stabilize a little bit and just give a little maturity back there, which not immaturity like they're a bunch of immature babies, but just still young NFL guys back there feeling out their way. And it,
Right. Yeah.
and in this league, if you're back end, you better have something back there. They could be exposed really quickly and be very long games.
Um, They also hired outside linebacker coach Charlie Bullen, who was formerly with the University of Illinois, and tight ends coach Tim Kelly, who was formerly the Titans offensive coordinator.
Hmm.
So, I mean, anytime you get a former play caller to go down to a position coach, I think that you're probably getting some of the better position coaches. But also, what do I know about tight ends coach? Not much. I mean, really, I'm hoping that, Daniel Bellinger continues to develop. I think that the Giants were interested in upgrading the tight end room regardless. I think that there's probably some people in the building, maybe people at the top, that are interested in moving on from Waller.
Mhm.
So
Well, let's put it this way: when we got Waller, the expectations he'll be like a wide receiver one in this offense. So if they're trying to upgrade the tight end coaching with something that maybe might be able to maximize their goal of having him being that if not wide receiver one, but like a primary target, which he really wasn't last year, injuries and otherwise.
No, yeah, injuries and otherwise. Yeah, I'm not really sure how much Tim Kelly is going to bring to that, but at least I know he's not a nobody. He's been around the league. He's done
Hmm.
all kinds of different positions of coaching. So I guess I'm pretty comfortable with that. We've got some excellent beards on this staff. Uh,
Yeah, jeez, this is a
um, One thing I did see, and I don't know much about this because it happened tonight, is the Giants also hired a strength and conditioning coach from Tennessee, which was like one of the most injured teams the last 3 years. So,
so three coaches from Tennessee come over.
yep, interesting, right? But I mean, also that was a strange head coaching vacancy. I think that was probably not a
Hmm.
decision until around that time the decision was made.
Yeah.
So I don't think anyone around the league was expecting it. I think suddenly guys were like, I don't know if I have a job anymore.
Hmm.
So
Sure. Sure.
I'm not totally shocked by that. But it is weird because I don't know that we hired Aaron Wellman as like some other fancy title, but I mean, how many workout coaches are you really? You know what I mean? Like, what else are these guys doing?
It's one of those things where it's very easy to blame for anything else to go. When all else fails, no one else
Like
to
the
blame. We'll
field.
bring this, yeah, blame the strength and conditioning guy because they get tired in fourth quarters or whatever. It's like, well, I don't know about that. So,
Well, it's just like I think that there are tons of reasons for injuries. One of which is the player themselves. Sometimes
mhm.
players don't take care of themselves, man. That is one thing that people don't consider. But like injuries happen for a multitude of reasons. Yes, fields and bad field conditions will contribute to that. Sometimes a history of injuries will contribute to that. You just end up being more brittle or more prone to concussions the more you get them. If you got them a lot in college, chances are good that's going to
Yeah.
carry over.
Mhm.
Uh,
We're not
Another thing,
robots. We're not robots. We're people, and everybody is built differently and different tolerances for pain as well.
sure. Also, the amount of rest.
Hey, related, Grump, real quick. I know we probably should bring this up too because the Meadowlands got awarded the World Cup in 2026, and
Yes, that's true.
there is talk about they have to have grass for the game regardless. The question is
Correct.
going to be, will that be a temporary situation where it's put in for the summer and taken out, or are we going to go to full-time grass? I know everybody loves to bitch and moan about our turf, even though it was no years old this year and people are still getting hurt, so they're blaming the turf. Um, you know, What do you want? Do you want grass? Does it really matter to you at all? Uh,
Um, I think that having grass at MetLife, uh, it could be a real problem because there are scheduling times where the Jets and Giants play Sunday, Monday.
sure.
It's not common. I would say that it's a better situation than Heinz Field or whatever. I don't know if it's still called that, but you're not having Pitt play there on Saturday and then Pittsburgh playing there the next day.
They do have that in Tampa Bay with the with USF and the Bucks. They do sometimes have
Yeah,
a Saturday, Sunday.
yeah, but MetLife, nothing really goes on Saturdays as far as I know at MetLife.
No, the only thing they possibly could do is because, again, remember that, well, I guess by the time it will be 2 years, the grass was, wouldn't be next year, the year after. I mean,
Right.
if the Jets still happen to have Aaron Rodgers, they're going to be on prime time a lot. They're going to be on Monday nights quite a bit, or Thursdays quite a bit. So you might see that doubleheader weekend, possibility of it happening.
I don't really have a problem I don't think it's going to happen because the maintenance costs. When you're in the north, especially the temperate north like New Jersey, where you get really humid summers with lots of rain in the spring and stuff like that, and then you get really really cold winters
Well,
and really dry summer. It's like
you also
the
get less
worst ever.
sunlight. You get less sunlight up in the north too. I mean, we're down in Florida. It gets dark at 6:30. Here it gets dark at like 5 o'clock or whatever.
Yeah.
So less sunlight is less time for grass to grow and to recuperate
and to recover. Yeah.
Right.
So I mean, like anytime it's in the north, you're going to have extremely high maintenance costs that you wouldn't get other places. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess it could be a disaster at the same time. Like people take for granted, like like for instance, this year, how many rain games did we go to, man?
Too many.
That field could have been permanently screwed up. Like it may have been with the amount of like cleat action in mud. Like I don't know. And I understand that they have all the money in the world to fix it or replace it or do whatever they need to do, but just know that they don't like spending that money.
My only hope is if they do it right. Because you remember at Old Giant Stadium, they tried to do those pods, and
I remember
it was an awful mess. Yeah, it never worked. And if they're going to do it, lay out the money. You have two teams invested in it.
Well, that's the thing. Right. And I think that's the whole problem with the stadium itself is that and it involves two teams. So I don't know. I don't think it was really looked at logically.
No.
That's going to do it for this episode. This was the last episode of the 2023 season. Starting next week, we will have on our regular scheduled Tuesday morning, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Our regular scheduled Tuesday morning episode will be the first one of the 2024 off season, and we're going to go over the Giants roster and essentially what they're heading into with the off season, and we're going to jump right into quarterback talk as well. So each time we go through positions through the coming weeks, we're going to talk about the situation on the roster and what any possible solutions are in the draft and in free agency all the way up to the draft. So we have a flood of episodes coming, and I'm really excited for it. This is like where you get to talk about all the different possibilities, and it's a lot of fun to imagine and think like that.
It's one of the bright sides of having a bad season is that it's like there's more of a sense of an urgency and excitement of digging in and saying, how do we fix this? What can we do?
Yeah.
So this is good to really let's break this thing down. It's not all horrible. There are, bright spots and gems on this roster. We'll identify that. We'll see what we can do, see how the cap's going to bite us, all that different stuff. So I'm looking forward to it, and I'm glad I'm doing with you, Grump, because I know all the work you put in, with your film reviews and everything. So this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I've already started. As a reminder, I have my Grump channel as well, and so videos will be coming out on there as well as I go through all this stuff. So I've only gotten started. I will have some stuff out on there pretty soon. I have a Senior Bowl biggest winners video coming out pretty soon, but the amount of editing, it's taking a lot longer than I thought it would. And I'm trying not to compromise actually continuing to review guys. So I don't know when that's coming out, but it's coming out, and be sure to subscribe to that channel. Please. Thank you. That's going to do it for us tonight, and we will see you guys next week. Until then, go Giants.
Go Giants.